I'm Luca Giliberti, contributing writer for Gold Derby, and I'm excited to talk about the fourth and final season of Ozark with Emmy-nominated composers Danny Bensi and Saunder Jurriaans. Given that we're talking about a fourth season here, how did you weigh when to use pre-existing compositions versus when to create completely new ones for this final season? Whoever would like to take that one first.
I'll go ahead. Well, I mean, Ozark has been a really well-oiled machine through all these seasons, and the editors have done a fantastic job of really helping us score the series as well, and using cues from previous seasons when they are, when they make sense. So that was a big roadmap for us, for sure, is working with the editors to decide, these are older themes that deserve to keep going through the series. And then there's a lot of new characters. There's Javi, who's the nephew of Navarro, and he has his own theme. And then Ruth has kind of multiple themes going on in this. So, it's more, it's a little of both of that.
And one of my favorite compositions that you created for this show is what is now denominated Ben's theme, because it's the rare composition to have a natural piano sound, which I really like. And it makes a return in season 4, as some of the characters are still very much grappling with Ben's death. Given just how discernible that track is, talk about how you and the editors in this case, as you mentioned, decided when to sprinkle it in this season.
Yeah, I think it was more at the beginning of the season. The straight Ben stuff was kind of still, almost a emotional hangover from season 3. It kind of, Ruth's kind of when Wyatt dies in season 4, Ruth has a new kind of emotional theme that has a lot to do with Ben's theme. It's almost a progression from Ben's theme. It's her pain from Ben passing on into this pain. So that theme starts out as the same Ben theme and then kind of mutates into this new thing.
Interesting. Dan, is there anything you wanted to add, or?
No, I mean, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, the building blocks there, an emotional piano chords, sparse, soft piano with a cushion dampener across the hammers of the piano. So it's super quiet and intimate, which is how we like it. And also the piano is always a little bit out of tune to give it our kind of twist on things.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting. We'll actually talk about the Ruth theme that was just alluded to in just a bit. But, knowing that season 4 was going to be the show's last, did you approach the season any differently? As in, were there any tonalities or any moods that you wanted to foreground or add to the overall sound of the show, knowing where the story would end?
Perhaps the strings got a tiny bit bigger, but I feel like we were so excited about the 4th season. I remember us saying, like, oh, we can really, like, as a 4th and final season, I wonder if we can push it and get a little bigger than usual or something. And I remember the answer coming back to us kind of like, no. You stay in the same world, and add some new things, but really stay in the same world. We don't need to depart from where we've been, even though it's the 4th season or whatever. So it kind of got denied on that aspect, but it just made it even more challenging to find a new way to have the score grow ever so slightly, right, and go somewhere without it sounding like a whole new score,
Yeah, there was a lot of pushing of existing sounds, so darker stuff got even darker, more distorted. We reran thing through distortions, and then like Danny said, we did. I mean, I think there are more kind of strings and emotional moment, and especially that the end and the kind of culmination of all this is just on the edge of what Jason and Chris could handle in terms of emotionality. So.
Yeah, and what I noticed, and this is very much a reoccurring theme throughout the series, is that what we have a lot of in season 4 is scenes in which we hear nothing but the score, which always stands out to me since, as you've talked about, the score is usually very subdued on this show. Is that more of a director's choice when to just let the score carry a scene, or to what extent are you involved in that decision-making?
I think it's a little of both. It's we're reacting to what they, the edits that they send us, whether they're early, works in progress or scenes, and then it really is the one thing that about Ozark that was so special is the synergy between us and the whole editing team and sound editors, supervisors, music supervisor, and the editors, and Jason and Chris. I mean, it was really like all that stuff was a very easy kind of group mind decision. It wasn't even barely talked about. It just worked. And that's the thing. It's like, those moments are so powerful because I think because we do restrain the music, and it's not like, okay, now it's just music and it's got to be big and meaningful. And we found it much more intense and created a lot more anxiety or whatever we're trying to do, to just have one or two things going and this kind of like, you really feel it.
Right. And I'm actually going to use that as a segue to my next question, because I would like to talk about the last 10-15 minutes of episode 7, in which the directing, the editing, the cinematography, and the score really form this orchestra and create this unbelievable tension as things go down. Talk about scoring those last 10-15 minutes and creating that unbelievable tension.
What was the end of season 7? Just remind me, refresh me.
That's when Ruth confronts the birds, Marty and Wendy, after she finds Darlene and Wyatt, dead, and then she goes to the birds, and she's very angry, and then.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, as in, it's kind of the mid-season finale.
Exactly.
So it really is like this culmination of that part of, and it's the beginning of the end. It's the beginning of Ruth's inevitable. The ending of her story and the ending of the whole story. So yeah, it was a difficult passage because there's a lot of music and we have to stay out of the way of all this story that's going on and also kind of use it as a springboard for the next 7 episodes that are coming up.
That's,
Danny, is there anything you would like to add, or?
No, it's just all so subtle how you do it. Really, it's about adding one thing here, taking one thing away there, but keeping this minimal, just slightly emotional world to allow it to grow from somewhere. Yeah, at the end of 7 there, you're right. And then how does it develop in 8? And allow us to sort of release in this melancholic, but just like a kettle steaming or something,
yes,
or just beginning to steam, and just letting a little bit of pressure out, but it's not quite releasing like a big Hollywood movie or something.
I always like to equate some of the music to a heartbeat that's beating just a little too fast.
Yeah,
it's not a relaxed resting heartbeat. It's like
it's not an anxiety attack, but it could be an anxiety attack somewhere.
Absolutely. And for that final scene, what instruments did you use for the scene of Ruth in the car at the end of episode 7, in which again we only hear the score? I could definitely hear strings, but what else is there?
Yeah, I think it's synth, strings. I can't really remember exactly. Yeah. There's probably some piano in there.
Yeah, there's the piano.
We have the
strings. The strings are really tripped out though, aren't they? And then also the just one synth maybe or two, that's it.
Yeah.
But within that, I see what I see is musically so much distance in there though. If I put the synth in a certain sort of box of texture, then the strings in a certain texture, and then the piano, and that's 3 sort of, if you're looking at a landscape painting, that's like ground and sky and something in the shadows, whether it's close up or, and that's quite a large world that you can create. It's kind of the Ozark world for us, and we finally have all the pieces, and it's just textures though, right? It's not like a memorable melody or something. It's just texture that the audience is like, oh, I know this. It's big. The story is big and long and like a saga. And this kind of creates that backdrop for allowing you to think that way. You see, it's kind of like a carpet. I don't know how. It's like, here you go. You think upon this landscape, and about what's happening. And then if you have a piano come in with a melody or just foreshadowing 2 notes or something that we've been hearing, and that's all you need in order to sort of culminate these things and bring them together.
And that's really where that new Ruth theme begins.
Yeah, exactly.
Her kind of inevitable downfall.
Yeah, it's the inevitable.
Nobody wants to accept.
No, yeah.
Yeah, but that's exactly why I had asked about the instruments in that scene, because what I really liked about that final composition in episode 7 is that you could feel like it felt like something had gone rotten, and you could feel that something dramatic was going to follow. And I just absolutely love that, especially as a conclusion to part 1, and knowing that we would have to wait most likely several months to part 2. Right. We didn't know at the time yet when it was going to return. So I really like that. And then, as you mentioned, in episode 8, Ruth kills Javi. And after that, we have this sequence in which, once again, the score adds so much dimension as Ruth walks out of Claire Shaw's office and down to the parking garage. I'm certain that at least parts of that composition had been used before, but something about it felt very different here. It felt louder and heavier and more perilous in a way. So what were you pursuing tonally with
that's an older Ruth theme. I mean, Ruth had many themes throughout all the seasons, but yeah, it was an older one that exactly we because most of Ruth's material had an innocence to it, even though it was all, she was always had this kind of almost like, it was a gears turning, she's conniving, she's like wheeling and dealing, but in her kind of fun Ruth way. But then when she kills Javi, and in that episode that turns into something much darker, and again it's that the wheels of inevitability are turning, and you're like, she's not going to come back from this one, So it's exactly what we did. We took an existing Ruth theme and kind of deepened it and darkened it.
Dan, is there anything you would like to add, or?
No, that's couldn't describe it better myself.
Perfect. And, from there, I actually would like to jump to the end of episode 12, in which Wendy smashes her head against the window and just lets, the blood run down her face as her face is sort of frozen in restraint. Here, the score is very subtle once again, but it emitted such, again, peril and menace for me. So what were you going for creatively in that sequence?
I'm going to answer this one again because that was clear in my mind too, scoring that, because that was her losing her facing the potential loss of her children, and everything that she's been trying to hold on to. And Wendy has this kind of crazy arc. I feel like it's in the last, it's all through, at the end of season 3 into season 4, she's really kind of losing her mind. And she's I find her the most frightening character, the most kind of,
unpredictable.
Yeah, unpredictable, and she's gonna screw everything up. My God, the whole time, like, oh, not again. But this is like her really breaking down in a kind of multi-level way. Like there's an emotional aspect. There's a kind of a loss of reality to her. The begging her father in that moment. We used all sorts of, there's some kind of emotional string sounds, but at the same time, there's these high pitched kind of screeching, like in the background, this ringing. I think it's still in there. I don't know if they finished it, but and these tonal things that are just really out of tune and really off-putting. And then I think we went to silence at some point too. I can't remember exactly what the score did when she smashed her head against the window. It goes to silence. Yeah,
it does.
And it just that performance of hers is just so good. I mean, we all were in agreement. Like, just let it breathe there.
Yeah, it's a very haunting scene, and the way I almost wanted to describe it was you hear like sirens almost, but it's such an, I mean, you really have to pay like close attention to hear the details, and I really enjoyed that.
Right.
And then We have to talk about the ending sequence of episode 13, in which Rachel kills Nelson. As we've clearly established even here today, tension and intensity are not a rare thing on Ozark, but this sequence felt very specific to me. So again, walk me through the process of scoring this one. Whoever would like to start.
I'll do it again just because I have it all still fresh in my mind. And Danny, if you want to jump in, go for it. This was because I remember this is one of those, there's Ozark has such a specific sound and that drive, those driving percussive sound stuff, which are, great at using as building blocks and stuff. But there's times when there's a long sequence like this that it becomes really hard to kind of manage that. And this was one that was, because it wasn't like a sculpting of like different levels of intensity. It was like a slow ramp up from Ruth leaving, I forget where she was, but whatever. But
police station.
Police station, yeah.
Yeah.
And her driving, and we're just watching another impending, like, the inevitable doom of these characters. And Nelson, who's been, a staple of the series for so long, we're like, oh, I don't like him, but is he really gonna die? And so it was like this again. I think it was I think we used some material from an earlier Nelson theme and then really built on it. And it was a really like, just getting that to drive through that whole sequence was a challenge. But in the end, it gets pretty intense and pretty crazy. And I think that's, all of these are the beginning of Ruth's end, but this is a big part of it. Because Nelson, the minute they know Nelson is dead, everything is kind of going to shit.
Absolutely. Once again, what I liked here is when you hear those final notes of that sequence, you can really tell that we're heading into the finale, and that it really stood out to me. And speaking of the finale, on a final note, I want to talk about Ruth's death and the sort of triste emotional score that follows as we cut to the birds at the fundraiser, all of which truly felt like a swan song. So what was important to you as you were scoring this scene and bidding goodbye to a fan favorite character like Ruth?
Danny, you can.
This is our piece, the
big one, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying the piece is one of our, this was a COVID collaboration, wasn't it? Where you wrote the piano piece and then I threw the cello to kind of meander around it. And what was great about doing it that way was it became this very sparse swan song, didn't it? It's a very like, I say something on the cello and then there's a piano chord from you to kind of, well, what about this? And the colors are like a myriad of like similar sort of watercolors, and we're allowed to exist in this space where we can be with Ruth, right? And it's like, it's not outpouring and it's not too constrained. It's just a place like a little oasis where the cello can be free and the piano can be free, and we can express and grow and move around. And it's like one of the only times in Ozark that we've been able to do that. There's been a couple of moments where even in season 1, where Jason Bateman's character can sort of, where he's thinking into the horizon or whatever, and there's sort of a freedom there. Or there's another moment where there's a repose in another season, like where there's repose, but we never can really settle, because it's the impending doom is always there. And in this one, we allowed ourselves a little bit of space to move around the chords, and it was so freeing, and to play with so much emotion, that piece. And we were yearning for it. I mean, we had so much fun scoring that, didn't we? It was like, let's make it really heartfelt. No like reverbs on the cello, like all over the place. Just like one simple reverb, like a real tangible recording for this piece, so that it really was poignant and really stood out, like as a place.
Also there's a lot of space in it. There's there's kind of pulses of music, and then there's moments of quiet where there's really just you and the image, which I think in general is a trademark of the Ozark score that has always been powerful. I with all the emotional stuff and all the kind of more anxious stuff.
Absolutely. And it was very emotional. It was very affecting, the score in that final scene. And then we also have the slow motion, which I think added to that. So, you know, it fit to the occasion, obviously. Well, Danny and Saunder, congratulations on this season, on this series, and on this final season. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.